You've probably heard the phrase thinking like a lawyer, right? It gets tossed around all the time. But what does it actually mean? Is it about finding some clever loophole? Is it just about being good at arguing? Well, let's get into it, because what's really going on is way more interesting than that. I mean, this quote really just cuts right to the heart of it. Think about it. If law school was just about memorizing a giant book of rules, it'd be a colossal waste of time and money. It would just be an expensive citation factory, producing people who are good at looking things up, but not at actually thinking. So that's the big question, isn't it? If it's not about turning you into a walking, talking encyclopedia of legal statutes, then what is this core skill they're trying to build? What is this whole way of thinking thing all about? And here it is. The answer is a skill called structured judgment. See, it's not about knowing all the answers. It's about having a very specific method for thinking your way through a problem when the facts are a mess, when words can mean different things, when the stakes are incredibly high and you're working under tight constraints. It's basically a mental toolkit for navigating chaos. Okay, so how do you build this toolkit? It all starts with a huge shift in perspective. Let's break down the first set of components, the legal framework for thinking. This right here is the absolute foundation. You know, in science or engineering, the goal is usually to find the objective truth. But in law, the very first question isn't what's true. It's who gets to decide what's true. It's a fundamental pivot to thinking about power, process, and authority. And that single question immediately breaks down into these four. See, it's not enough to just say the judge decides. You have to ask, why do they get to decide? Is it the Constitution, a specific law? And how do they have to decide? Are there specific procedures? And what are their limits? This is why legal thinking is so obsessed with legitimacy, not just winning or losing. Now, real life is messy, right? It's chaotic and filled with a million details. The lawyer's brain is trained to be this super efficient filter. It takes that messy reality and ruthlessly asks, which of these facts actually matter legally? Which ones can we actually prove? And which ones flip the switch on a specific part of the law? It's not just spotting issues, it's a real craft of figuring out what's relevant. Honestly, thinking like a lawyer is a lot like learning a brand new language, one that has its own special grammar for making arguments. You have to learn the difference between a rule, which is like a clear command, and a standard, which is more flexible. You have to know how to read a judge's decision and pull out the ratio. That's the core logic, and ignore the obiter, which is just a passing comment. Being right doesn't mean anything if you can't speak this language. All right, so that's the basic framework. But on top of that, it takes a really unique mindset. You have to learn to be comfortable with ambiguity and develop a super disciplined way to make and break arguments. Just think about the words the law is built on. Words like reasonable, good faith, foreseeable. These aren't precise mathematical terms. And that's on purpose. They are intentionally fuzzy so they can apply to a million different situations nobody's thought of yet. A huge part of this skill set is learning how to build rock-solid arguments on top of this naturally soft and fuzzy ground. So when you're faced with all this fuzziness, there are two big traps you can fall into. On one side, there's mechanical formalism, which is just blindly applying a rule without any thought for the context. On the other side is pure politics, where you just think anything goes and it's all subjective. The goal, the real skill, is to walk that narrow path right down the middle. Structured discretion. A disciplined, thoughtful way to interpret the gray areas. Now we get to what I think is a real superpower of the lawyer's brain, steel manning. You've probably heard of a straw man argument, where you build up a weak version of your opponent's idea just to knock it down. Well, this is the exact opposite. You take your opponent's argument and you make it stronger. You build the most powerful, most persuasive version of it you possibly can. And why on earth would you do that? Because it is the ultimate form of preparation. It forces you to see every possible counterattack before it comes. It shows you exactly what points you can safely give up in a debate. It makes it almost impossible to be blindsided. This isn't cynicism. It's a deep form of intellectual honesty. It's how you get really, really good. And finally, there's this. A trained legal mind understands that no rule ever exists by itself, in a vacuum. It's always part of a bigger, more complex system. How will people actually react to this rule? Can we even enforce it? What are the second and third order consequences going to be? In that way, lawyers are kind of like engineers, but instead of bridges, they're designing and troubleshooting systems for how people behave. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got the framework, we've got the mindset. What does it all add up to? What is the lawyer brain's true superpower out there in the real world? But first, let's be honest for a second. this process doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes legal education misses the mark and just turns into a contest of memorizing trivia, or it becomes all about performative arguments in class. Or my personal favorite, case law karaoke, which is just mindlessly repeating what a judge said without really understanding the deep reasoning behind it. But when it does work, wow, it creates this incredibly powerful and, this is the key, portable skill. The ability to reason clearly when authority is in question, the facts are a mess, and the rules are ambiguous. That's a skill that is priceless, not just in a courtroom, but in a boardroom, in a government office, in any complex situation you can imagine. So if we had to boil this entire thing down to a single process, the lawyer brain is basically just an engine that is constantly asking these 4 questions all at the same time. What's the rule? What should it mean in this specific situation? Who actually has the power to make that call? And what's going to happen in the real world if they do? It's a nonstop loop of analysis. Now, there is one, let's call it a side effect to having a brain that's constantly running this software. It can make you kind of annoying at parties. But hey, that's the trade-off, isn't it? It might make you a pain to argue with over dinner, but it also makes you unbelievably useful for solving the toughest problems everywhere else.